Are black women a barrier to black male leadership? It has been a very interesting political cycle so far, to say the least. And while many people have noticed that there is a lot of blame being thrown around in this political climate, I think there's also something else going on here. The race for black male leadership is a white supremacist narrative. In fact, we can see this playing out just by looking at the statistics. Less than 15% of black men are not married to black women in America today. Only 0.1% of CEOs are African American males, and there are only 5 African Americans men who own billion-dollar companies. The rest are Oprah, Rihanna and African or Caribbean brothers. I did not include Ye because we all witnessed what happened to that brother. The race for black male leadership is a white supremacist narrative. To understand the history of this race, we must go back to the beginning and examine who created it and why. First, let's look at how African identity did not originate in Africa. Rather, it began as an invention that would eventually be used against us. African people have been living all over the world for thousands of years before Europeans were even aware of our existence on Earth. We are a multi-ethnic and multinational people who have lived throughout Asia and Europe since ancient times. But when Europeans came along, they named us Negroes, the Latin word for black, because they thought they had found another continent full of blacks, Africa. The truth is that there are many different tribes within Africa with their own cultures, languages, and traditions, but because Europeans wanted to dehumanize Africans by making them seem primitive heathen savages who ate each other's brains every day after killing each other with spears in order to survive during their journey across oceans without water bottles or life jackets, and no one even cared about these poor souls, they made up stories about cannibalism which has since been proven false by modern anthropologists and historians. African identity did not originate in Africa. Africa is not a country. It's a continent with 54 countries, each with its own language and culture. So when you say African American or African American culture, you are in fact saying American American culture. The same can be said for the term Black Lives Matter. Because they do, all lives matter. Why are we segregating our movement? We need to stop dividing ourselves into ethnic groups. It weakens our power as a community to claim any kind of real liberation from white supremacy if we continue to think of ourselves as separate tribes struggling against each other instead of working together toward common goals like ending police brutality and achieving reparations for slavery victims who were never compensated for their suffering under chattel bondage. American black people are a multi-ethnic and multinational people. American black identity did not originate in Africa. It's a European invention. African identity is an artificial construct, for the purposes of enslaving Africans and denigrating them as inferior. And it makes no sense to embrace this artificial construct over the natural one that exists, which is why I call myself a foundational Black American instead of American Black, or African American. I am FBA because I was born a different color than the people around me. I FBA because my ancestors were enslaved by elite whites, and when they arrived in America they were stripped of their names, cultures, languages, religions and laws. They were forced to live like animals on plantations where they were beaten, raped and worked to death. I am FBA because my ancestors were the ones who built this country when most of the colonies were failing. My ancestors provided free labor that built the majority of the country's wealth. The elite white power structure have been trying to divide and conquer us from the very beginning. They've invented countless ways to keep us from seeing our own power, including slavery, colonialism and Jim Crow laws. White supremacists have always known that if we unite, it will be impossible for them to continue their oppression. When we are strong together as men and women of color, black men benefit from this strength as well. Do you see what's happening here? We are being played against each other. It is a game, and that game is racist. It is not black women versus black men. It's not even two separate issues, sexism and racism. We must recognize the racist game being played and use our power for good to unify and heal, instead of continuing to tear each other down with blame and victimization, which is exactly what the system wants us to do. The game of racism is being played by white supremacists. The goal of the game is to keep us divided, vulnerable, and powerless by focusing our attention on each other instead of the real enemy, white supremacy. But we can win this game. And when we do, it will be because we've learned how to use our power for good instead of evil, and that means recognizing that white supremacy exists, as well as recognizing that racism isn't just about individual acts committed by individual people, it also has structural components, i.e., systems, and historical precedents, i.e., past events. This means that black men need to recognize their own culpability in perpetuating these structures so they can work on changing them. Similarly, Black women need to realize that there are some things about them that need to be addressed in perpetuating these structures, that enhance the agenda of elite whites and their system of supremacy. Notice I am not blaming white people, or the white man, but am pointing out the systems and structures that elite whites use to keep us all divided. I am calling out the matrix. There are many black women who genuinely and sincerely love brothers in the black community, but at the same time I realize that many black women do not support black men in the way that they should. You are right, the black community is a family. The black man is the head of the family and he needs to start showing some respect for black women. Black women need to start showing some respect for black men. Black men should also show more respect toward other brothers as well. The media constantly portrays black men as being unintelligent or thugs or criminals, which isn't true at all. 61% of black men are in the middle class or rich, and black men make up the majority of millionaires in this country. There are many black women who genuinely and sincerely love brothers in the black community, but at the same time I realize that many black women do not support black men in the way that they should. The black community is a family, and it should be treated as such. We need to start supporting each other in order to get out of this rut we're in. The media has brainwashed us into thinking that we are not capable of achieving anything without white people's help. We are so quick to judge one another and condemn one another for any small mistake or flaw. Let's be honest. We are quick to judge each other, and we are even quicker to condemn one another for any small mistake or flaw. But this mentality must change if we really want black men to lead and black women to support black leadership. We need to show more grace to one another while still holding each other accountable. We must show respect to our brothers and sisters without allowing emotions to cloud our judgment. We must do what my dad used to tell me as a child. Watch your temper and control your tongue. We must stop saying the most disrespectful things to one another in public, just because we are hurt or feel shame. It's time that we start building up each other instead of tearing each other down. So where does that leave us? Nowhere. Most black male superstars in entertainment and sports are not married to a black woman. They are married to white women. Or women from other communities. Now, before you get all bent out of shape, let me be clear, black women are not a barrier to black male leadership. Why? Because as black men we can choose to marry whomever we want. Black men can have a family with any woman he chooses and that child will still be black and part of the community. Black men can choose to be with a woman that will get on his page and doesn't have to marry any woman that is not willing to follow his lead. In fact, black women can be an asset if they choose to. But most don't choose to be an asset because they would rather be strong and independent than act as a team player that's willing to support her man in his endeavors for the betterment of himself and his community. So where does that leave us? Nowhere. Even though 85% of black men that are married have a black wife, 15% are married to non-American black women, white and other, and is expected to double in the next 5 years. Black men are still exercising their leadership, but they are just choosing women who are more traditional and submissive, who are not necessarily from the black community. Many are rejecting the image of their mothers, because most black men grew up under the tyranny of single motherhood, in which they are trying to escape. Hence the 𝗔𝗯𝘂 and mainstream of the passport brothers. This is not new information, it has been going on for decades now and continues today with no end in sight. So what do we do? How do we fix this problem? Do we even want it fixed? The answer is yes. We must come together as one people under God with one common goal, freedom from oppression, tyranny and injustice, so that we may truly be free from bondage forevermore. The real question is, what do you think about the topic? We are being played against each other. We are so quick to judge one another and condemn one another for any small mistake or flaw. When you look at the numbers, it is clear that black men who are still single are not choosing to marrying modern black women. Conclusion. So, what is the conclusion of this video? Black women are not a barrier to black male leadership. Black women have a role to play in the success of black men, but they are not the reason why they are not leading. White men or white supremacy is not a barrier to black male leadership. Black men are their own worst enemy and their own greatest asset. Black men need to create an environment where they can thrive and grow. They do not need to blame the black woman or the white man. They only need to go where they are celebrated, get on code with each other as a collective and stand up against systematic racism and begin to lead and exert leadership not just individually but also as part of the collective. When black men do this, not only will black women follow suit, but the world as a whole will follow suit as well. Black men as a collective are the true messiah and saviors of themselves. Black men need only get on code. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for watching. This is Too Much Moxie, and I am out. Peace.